So rather than go to kibbutz, I'm going to learn about my heritage. So I checked into Esha Torah. I was supposed to stay for 3 months. I stayed a little longer. My 3 months now turned into 7 months and 36 years. Time flies when you're having fun. So I stayed, I studied full time. I got smicha. My mother told me it wasn't the best job for a Jewish boy. So I got a master's degree in history. I'm a licensed tour guide, author, motivational speaker. I spend about 80% of my time in Israel teaching, guiding, writing. And 20% I go on speaking tours to exotic places like New Jersey. And I have 5 kids who are all older. Thank God, all post-army. Finally could sleep at night. And with that little introduction, what I want to do is do a little introduction to Jewish history. I call this class Back to the Future. I hate using the term history when I teach history, because as soon as I say the word history, everyone thinks of subject in school. And nothing turns you off to learning like making it a subject in school, which is why my quote from my high school yearbook is my favorite Mark Twain quote: "I never let my schooling interfere with my education." And the longer I'm out of school, the more I appreciate that what I remember in this life and use has very little to do with what I learned formally in a classroom. So the reason we need to know history has nothing to do with memorizing names and dates and places. It has everything to do with a quote from George Santayana, Spanish-American writer, philosopher from the mid-20th century. It's a quote you all heard. "Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it." Doomed to repeat it, exactly. The idea is human nature, and we tend to do the same stupid things over and over again. I think it's Elie Wiesel who said it the best. He says, one thing we learn from history, it's we don't learn from history. At least one thing we learn. But as to why we need to know Jewish history goes back to a much more profound point. And to understand that point, we have to first understand what is the most important idea that we, the Jews, gave the world. Besides guilt, bagels, junk bonds, leverage buyouts, Einstein, Marx, Freud, 23% of all the Nobel Prizes since 1900, 24% of the Fields Medals of Mathematics. What's the greatest Jewish contribution to civilization? One God, brought to you by the Jewish people. Oh, I like that ring. One God, brought to you by the Jewish people. One God and one absolute standard of morality, totally transformative idea. The first book I wrote, actually I can have some, I'm doing an infomercial. I'll have some copies tomorrow night for sale. Not World Perfect, has to do with the impact of monotheism on morality. But one God has huge implications for history also. Because what we understand about God, even though we don't understand about God, is that we like to define him as the creator, sustainer, and supervisor. That God knows and controls everything. That everything that happens on the planet Earth, from the cosmic to the subatomic to the quantum, is under the constant supervision, direction, and control of an infinite intelligence. It's like a fundamental belief in Judaism. There's no randomness. That history is a controlled process leading to a destination. It's called determinism. So we got that point down? So history, we're all in a story. Simply put, we're in a story. Like a movie. I don't know about you guys, but if someone walked up to me on the street, imagine someone walks up and sticks a microphone in your face, you're in a story. Like, what would your first question be? What would you ask? Sorry? What's my role? Yeah, what's my role? I would first ask, like, what kind of story is this? It's like a romantic comedy, science fiction, action, drama. And then, like, what's my role in it? Am I a lead actor, bit part, supporting actor? Like, how long do we take? Where are we in the story? So this introduction is designed to answer the most basic, I would say, philosophical questions and historical questions about Judaism. What does Judaism say is the purpose of creation? What's the Jewish people's role in the story? How long does it take? Where are we? Beginning, middle, end? Like, how much time do we have left? And do we get to interact with the author and decide how it turns out, or we just script it in like a normal movie? So let's begin at the beginning. And again, I apologize. Like I said, just flew in this morning, so hopefully my brain will continue to function for the remainder of the class. Because now my body's telling me, what time is it in Israel now? Getting late. Let's begin at the beginning. When do we start keeping time from in Judaism? Anyone know? First of all, the calendar we use today, 2018, is a measurement from beginning from what event? 2018 from the birth of Jesus. Okay? Guys, why don't you move forward if you don't mind. So I have to project all the way to the back of the room. We got so many empty seats here, if you don't mind. You're going to make me work hard? Okay. He may have been a nice Jewish boy. We don't start our calendar from the birth of Jesus. When do we start keeping time from in Judaism? Anyone know? From what event? Oh, that's pretty good. Most people, by the way, start by saying the logical place to begin would be day one of the creation story. Day one is the Big Bang. Why is that the logical place to begin? Because that's when time begins. What's time a measurement of? Change. Until you have a physical world, you can't have time. So the logical place would be day one, but we actually start on day 6. What happened on day 6? Where we are now. Day 6 is Friday. But what happened on day 6 in the creation story? Adam. That was so gender specific. You guys are not, I'm just joking. I went to Vassar. They used to say things like, when God created man, she was only joking. Or what did God say when she created man? I can do better than that. Those are the feminist jokes back from like 30 plus years ago. Well, we start on day 6, which is the creation of human beings. By the way, we have a great teacher at Esha Torah, Dr. Gerald Schroeder. Any of you guys know Dr. Schroeder? Oh. Anyone goes, anyone know Dr. Schroeder? So Dr. Schroeder, double PhD. His mother's so happy. My son, the doctor, twice. Double PhD in nuclear physics and oceanography. He's written 4 books on science and Torah. He does a wonderful job of crunching like 13.5 billion years down into 5 days. And it fits beautifully, by the way. And we had the science before science had the science. But that's not my topic. But day 6, creation of human beings. What's the lesson we learn from the fact that we start from day 6 and not day 1, which seems to be a more logical place to begin? I always use the Hollywood movie director to explain this point. A big Hollywood movie director like Quentin Tarantino, the Coen brothers, Steven Spielberg, they don't wake up in the morning, get on the phone and say, hey guys, grab some equipment. We're shooting a major blockbuster motion picture today. Before you start actually filming a movie, what do you got to do? Script, casting, scenery, special effects, makeup, lighting, all that huge pre-production work you got to do. God, the ultimate producer-director, takes a lot of time to do pre-production. But when does the director say action with the clapboard and you start to film the movie? When who comes on the set? The actors. So just like we don't start a movie till the actors show up, we don't start our story, the ultimate story, till we show up. And just like in a movie when the actors finally show up on the set, like who was the highest paid actor last year in Hollywood? 2017 it was Mark Wahlberg. The year before it was Dwayne The Rock. He doesn't even act, he just looks muscular. Last highest paid female actress last year was Hermione. Yes? Emma Watson. And the year before? Hunger Games. Which is testing your Hollywood trivia. Yeah, exactly. These people make, the A-list actors and actresses, they make a lot of money. They make millions of dollars per movie. They don't show up the first day of filming. The director says action, and they're like, what? I got lines? I'm supposed to do something? What have they been spending months doing? Getting into their part. Getting into their lines. So too, we got lines. What are our lines? What's the question I'm really asking? It's the biggest question there is. The biggest question there is. Sorry? What's our like? Why are we here? What's the meaning of life? I ask this question to thousands of people. Usually most of my students are much, they're like 20-year-olds. I always tell them, guys, you want to ask this question now. This is not the question you want to be asking on your deathbed. I have this great cartoon in my office with a guy sitting at his workstation and death, the Grim Reaper standing in the doorway. And he says, I'm really glad you're here because without a deadline, I'd never get anything done. But I ask this question to thousands of people a year. Most people look back at me completely blank stare. The biggest question there is, and most people actually go through their lives without really confronting it. When I ask religious Jews that question, almost all of them give me one of 2 answers. What do you think they tell me? We are here to serve God. Are we here to? Yeah, learn Torah and do the mitzvot. So first of all, Torah and mitzvot, obviously, super important, but there are means to an ends. By the way, that's a huge point. I firmly believe most of the religious world doesn't even get that point. There are means to an ends. And serving God is a figure of speech, but it's not possible because he's infinite. You can't do anything for infinity. Like, who's the richest guy in the world today? I think it's Jeff Bezos. I think it's Jeff. He used to go back and forth with Bill Gates, but I think Bezos beat him out and Amazon just taking over everything. But if he's having financial trouble, can you help him? If you can, I want to get to know you much, much better. No, God is infinitely wealthy. You can't give anything to God. He can give us anything and everything. We can only take from him. Now, for every relationship we have with God that is incomprehensible on a certain level, there's a human relationship that gives us a taste of that. So what does that sound like, where one side can only give, the other side can only take, besides your relationship with the IRS? More specific, you're right. But no, more specific than that, because everyone is someone's child. Once you get to a certain age, you can actually be useful, like you're a teenager. If your parents don't kill you, you could take the garbage out. I would say a mother and a newborn. What can a newborn baby do for its mother? Isn't it amazing how easy it was to impress your mother when you were like a day old? You drooled, you got excited. I always tell my students, come back, go home after a semester here and say to your parents, look, Mom, she won't be impressed. It's a completely lopsided relationship. Judaism says the purpose of creation is, and I'm getting this for those of you who know a little more depth, this is from the Ramchal. Mesilat Yesharim. So the purpose of creation is pleasure. By the way, when I say that to a bunch of Jews, they're like, no, you got the wrong religion. Judaism is not about pleasure. Judaism is about neuroses, like what I can eat, what I can't eat, what I can do on Friday night, what I can't do on Friday night. That's because we're confused. We think the opposite of pain is pleasure. The opposite of pain is no pain, which is comfort. Like a guy in the hospital, God forbid, after a big car accident, and he's on morphine. He was in a lot of pain. The doctor walks in and says, "Are you in pain?" He goes, "No, I'm in pleasure." And he goes, "No, I'm comfortable. It doesn't hurt anymore. I'm comfortable." By the way, this is a short version of a class by Rosh Hashiva, Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal. You should all go to aish.com and do the class, the 5 levels of pleasure. It's like being a human being 101 class. So the opposite of pain is no pain, which is comfort. Pain and pleasure actually go together. Don't worry, it's not a class on sadomasochism. Pain and pleasure go together like we say in sports. No pain, no gain. The more you work for something, the more meaningful it is, which is why like winning your Little League championship when you're 12 years old is not like winning the World Series, especially if you're a Chicago Cubs fan, because it only happens once every 100 years. Now seriously, there's different levels of pleasure, like the Richter scale, or like flying. Like I just flew in this morning on El Al cattle class. The planes are like so old, I think Moses flew on one of them. You got your knee in your nose, the guy's seat in your head, it's like ridiculous. Versus like business or economy plus, and then you got business and first class, and every level is just so much better than the level below it. Judaism says the lowest level pleasure is physical pleasure. One level up, anyone know the class? Is love. A lot more work and a lot greater pleasure. I'm skipping level 3 and level 2. I just want to get to level 1 because we need it for the class, but you got to go back and do the class properly. Judaism says that the highest level pleasure, and really the purpose of creation is one thing and one thing only, which is dvekut, or dvekis as we say in Yeshivish Ashkenazis. What is dvekut? Connection to God. That 1 minute of your soul's infinite direct connection with the infinite light that is God, without all the illusion of this physical world, is greater than lifetimes of lower level pleasures. In the Garden of Eden, which we always see, since they didn't have a smartphone back then, where do you see pictures of the Garden of Eden from? Renaissance Christian artists. It's always Adam and Eve, without any clothes, running through some forest with a snake, a tree, and what's hanging from the tree? Apple. There's no apple in Jewish sources, by the way. Grapes, figs, I think the Apple lobby got in there to boost Apple sales. But a Garden of Eden is not like some Club Med vacation place. The Garden of Eden is comparable to or synonymous with the perfect level of existence, like being in a 20-star hotel where every single thing is taken care of. Nothing to deal with. No carpool, no deadline at work, no shopping, no cooking, no cleaning, no smartphone beeping and buzzing and making us all ADD because it knows everything and we know nothing. All of that, no distractions. 100% free to use 100% of our time and our energy to accomplish what our soul really wants in the highest level, which is transcendence, to have that relationship. Like why eat ice cream when you can have transcendence? It should have been the shortest, most straightforward story. God puts us in a perfect environment, programs our soul to want to have a relationship with Him, and we hang out in the garden, as we say in 1960s slang, and groove on the Shekhinah. And the story's over, and the Torah is 1 Torah portion long. But something obviously went really wrong. Think about it. According to the pain is the pleasure, and the highest level pleasure is relationship with God. What's the hardest thing to build and maintain in this world? Relationship with God. Everyone wants it. I'm not saying just Jews. Everyone wants it, but no one wants to work for it. Which is why, by the way, wherever you look in this world, at any period of time, in any place, there's always religion. And it's not because, I hate when people say this, because primitive people didn't have science, they needed religion to explain the unexplainable, now we don't need it. Nonsense. It's the deepest yearning of every human soul to want transcendence and connection, but no one wants to work for it. It's like saying, I want to look great. I want to be ripped, have 8-pack abs. I don't want to diet and exercise. I'm going to eat junk food and play on my phone all day and buy that electro thing with the battery pack you put in your pocket that vibrates your stomach muscles. Someone must buy that because they see it for sale in all these men's magazines. Okay, guys, by the way, dieting doesn't work. What's the recidivism rate in dieting? Like, 100 people lose weight in dieting. How many are going to gain it back? 95. Because anyone who does this right knows it's permanent lifestyle changes. Lifetime of struggle to build and maintain a relationship with God. Okay, we already did the parent and the mother and baby analogy. Which human relationship sounds like that? Lifetime of struggle, build and maintain, sounds like? See, I got a room full of married people, so when a bunch of single people, they're all like, you know why? Because they learn about love from romantic comedies, and they're all the same. The guy meets the girl, intense relationship develops, always a crisis in the middle of the movie, usually the guy's fault, and they always get back together at the end, but the movie always ends at or before what event? The wedding, because then they lived happily ever after. Whereas anyone married knows the real fun begins after you say, I do. And you're stuck with that person, and you really got to work, exactly. My parents made Aliyah in their 80s, by the way, very impressive. My father was an oncologist at Sloan Kettering, very smart guy. He told me the day I got married, he said, now that you're married, I'm going to give you the definition of marriage. Now, a lot of people are married in this room, so you'll laugh. When I do it for single people, they're all like, he said, marriage is a really long meal with dessert first. Which is actually quite funny. So lifetime of struggle to build and maintain. The early narrative in the Bible is exactly that. People found it too hard to maintain a relationship with God. He's invisible. It's not easy to have a relationship with something that's not physically in front of you, like I am standing there. We can't go out for a cup of coffee. By the way, anyone who's religious knows exactly what I'm talking about. You do the Hashem. Did I pray? And if you say you never did that, you're lying. I'm sorry. Some of us, hopefully, there's some of the time actually, but it's really hard. People said, gee, I know God's out there, but it's so hard to have a relationship with an infinite, invisible being. But we've all had moments of awe, right? Like awe moment. Where are you when you have your awe moment? Inside or outside? Almost always outside. What are you looking at? Nature. Like a beautiful sunset, a thunderstorm. Anyone seen the Grand Canyon? That is like unbelievable. It doesn't even look real. I've been in Seattle probably 25 times. I once saw Mount Rainier come out even, because it rains 362 days of the year. It looks so big it doesn't look real. It's like unbelievable. So people said, I don't see God, but I see all the really cool, awe-inspiring things that immediately give me an emotional connection. I'll have a relationship with those as a way of indirectly having a relationship with God. But what happened after a number of generations? This is Judaism's take on what happened. What happened? People said, yeah, idol worship crept in. People said they forgot about God. Oh, a brand new pen, it doesn't even work. That's not a good sign. They forgot about God and just said, I'm going to worship the forces of nature. Idolatry, avodah zorah, as we say. Which, by the way, is the worst thing you can do in Judaism. Right? What's the first of the big 10? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God. No, there's God. That's reality. That's what it's all about. When we say, by the way, in Hebrew, Ein od milvado, what does that mean? In Israel, people put it on the back of their windows of their cars sometimes. You see it's like a sticker. What does Ein od milvado mean? Nothing besides God. Doesn't mean there's no other gods. It means there's nothing besides God. It means on a certain level, not to get too freaky before Shabbat, we're not even here. We're a projection of God's infinite consciousness. You can't help God, like I said before. You can't hurt him. To have a relationship with an idol, you're not hurting God. You're destroying yourself. It's like being married to an invisible spouse who's not there. You're spending your whole life with nothingness. But that's what happens. This is the Jewish take on how idolatry came into the world. The purpose of creation, relationship with God is lost. Humanity deteriorates down, down, down spiritually. And as I clearly, I think, illustrate in the first book I wrote, World Perfect, there's a direct connection between our relationship with each other and our relationship with God. That the world degenerates into violence and lawlessness until, what does it say in the Bible? The world is full of, what's the word used actually in this? Hamas. I wonder if those guys in Gaza knew that when they picked the name for their organization. Like lawless. They probably got on the phone. Let's call some Jews in New York and ask what we should call our organization. Hamas, lawlessness and violence. In the middle, God tries to salvage it with that Noah's Ark story, the flood, right? Which a lot of us learned as a cute little fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, and Noah's Ark. We have these big questions like, how did Noah know a male mosquito from a female mosquito? How to get a rhinoceros on the ark? I've been to Africa a lot of times. I've seen these things live. I would not want to push them onto anything. But it's a really, really heavy story. God says, use the world correctly or lose it. He wipes out the whole world, sparing, this is all stuff one guy, Noah, and his family, hoping they'll do what? Right, get the world back to repopulate the world with people, have a relationship with God. Back to the purpose of creation. Is Noah successful? No. He is righteous enough to save himself, but not proactive enough to get the world back on target. So the world continues to decline until it bottoms out at the Tower of Babel story. What's the plot of the Tower of Babel story? Humanity unites, but for all the wrong reasons. What do we call that today? General Assembly of the United Nations. Most destructive organization on the... By the way, Dory Gold, former Israeli ambassador, he wrote a book called Tower of Babel, Babel with B-A-B-B-L-E, about how the UN does so much damage in the world. We're big fans of the UN in Israel. But back then, what did they unite to do? Rebel against God. And God's thinking, I give up. I tried with Adam, I tried with Noah. You heard of the Big Bang, not the TV show, the actual theory? What's the reverse? You ever heard of the Big Crunch theory? It's a real theory in science which is no longer really accepted. Anyway, the idea is that the gravitational attraction of the collective mass of the universe overcomes the energy of expansion. So the universe stops expanding and collapses down into a point of nothingness called singularity and disappears. It's like the ultimate black hole nuke the universe theory. So God's thinking, I give up, forget it. We'll nuke the universe, try again, and maybe next round we'll do it right. But then along comes one human being, and this is an amazing story. The ability of one person to change the whole course of human history. I think this particular person is the greatest intellectual and idealist of all time. Who am I talking about? Abraham. Abraham Avinu. Abraham, our father, who, by the way, is born in the year 1948 from creation. I think that's really cool. Because I was born 1948 Christian calendar year, the Jewish state. And Abraham comes from a place called Ur of the Chaldees, Ur Kasdim. Where is Ur today, by the way? Where are we all from originally? Iraq, very good. We all know where Iraq is. You know, Ambrose Bierce, who wrote during the American Civil War, he has one of my favorite quotes. He said, war is God's way of teaching Americans geography. So out of Iraq, almost 4,000 years ago, comes one man who's great for two reasons. A, in a world that has totally lost connection with God, Abraham is a radically transformative, free-thinking guy. He's able to think outside the box and reconnect to a completely counterintuitive idea of an infinite creator of the universe. But imagine being the only person in the world to believe in a radically transformative idea which no one else could accept and most people will kill you for even saying. How many of us would have the chutzpah? That word is so Jewish, by the way. Most non-Jews can't even say it. They can't say tuchas, by the way, or simcha either, I've noticed. But how many of the chutzpah? What's chutzpah mean, by the way? Gall, audacity, gumption, spunk. You know, to even, I would say arrogance, I don't think it's arrogance, but the nerve to even whisper to our best friends. That's the greatness of Abraham. He says, I don't care what anyone thinks. I choose to live, and if necessary, to die for the reality of God. Now, by the way, Abraham knew a lot better than we know. You don't live for God, like I said before. You don't die for God. You don't do anything for God. But without relationship with him, we're doomed. We're going to eat each other alive. So he dedicates himself to a unique mission, which becomes the national historic mission of the Jewish people from his day until today, which is what? This is the chosen people thing. It's amazing how few Jews can articulate correctly the chosen people thing. You know, the non-Jewish world even made up a little nasty rhyme. How odd of God to choose the Jews. Like, pick someone people like with a good PR team that's popular. So how do we answer that back? So when we're feeling really politically incorrect after 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, we'll say, how odd of God to choose the Jews. It wasn't so odd, the Goyim annoyed him. That's not the answer. No, it wasn't so odd, the Jews chose God. Abraham says to God, God, I choose you. I choose to dedicate my life and life of my descendants to one mission, to teaching the world about the reality of you and the values that come from relationship with you. And God says back to Abraham, you're choosing me, Abraham? I choose you back, you and your descendants, us the Jewish people. Guys, what are we chosen for? It's not privilege. It might be a privilege to be Jewish, but we're not chosen for privilege. We're chosen for responsibility. What's the responsibility? The term we love to use in the Jewish world, overuse and often misuse, is tikkun olam. How do we translate that? Tikkun olam. Repair the world, fix the world. How's that for a cause? A little bigger than save the whales? By the way, the real job of being Jewish is actually Kiddush Hashem. We're the God squad, to live and act in a way that inspires other people. They look at us and they say, what's this guy's secret? But so our job is to be the nation whose job it is to bring humanity, to live and act in a way that inspires the world, to get the world back on target and bring humanity back to that relationship with God. That is the national historic mission of the Jewish people until today. Okay over there? Okay. So guys, now we have a big plot rewrite. The original plot was supposed to be humanity hangs out in the garden building a relationship with God, but they fumbled the ball. I can use an American football analogy. I was once teaching some English people and they're like, fumble the ball? What's that? They asked, an English person once asked me, he said, why do they call it football? No one's foot's touching the ball. Which is actually quite funny. But then ask a British person to explain cricket. As far as I could tell, one guy runs back and forth for 5 days and everyone else drinks beer. But humanity fumbles the ball. Abraham picks it up and runs with it. So the plot of not just Jewish history, but all of human history is humanity returns to God, Jewish people lead the way. This point is huge, by the way. When I'm teaching in Jerusalem, my students, I say, guys, this is one of the most basic points you got to get into your head because it changes your whole perspective. Not just Jewish history, but all of human history. And I tell my students, and it's a good lesson for all of us, that we have to learn to look at the world with Jewish lenses and Jewish software. Now, I don't know when you guys went to school, what you learned in school. I went to public school, like I said, I wasn't raised religious. I'm FFA from Aish. as opposed to FFB or BT, Balchuva, or Born Religious. But I learned, when I went to school, which was ages ago, the history we learned was the history of the dead white guys of Europe. It was all about Greece and Rome and Alexander and Napoleon and World War I and World War II and the French Revolution. But besides being very Eurocentric, it was basically the history of what? Power. Well, for sure Christianity, but power. Now, power is like the loud noise that distracts us and gets our attention, like sitting in a restaurant, the waiter drops a tray, everyone looks, and if it's in Israel, they all say Mazel Tov. It's quite funny. Yes. But the real plot is something that is much more subtle, and it runs through and connects everything. And I tell my students, if you can learn to look at history with Jewish lenses and Jewish software, it's like looking at a different wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum. Remember that with physics? Visible light is only a little bit of the spectrum. What else is on the spectrum? Gamma ray, ultraviolet, infrared, X-ray. You look at the world with infrared glasses, it looks very, very different. And all the seemingly disconnected events start to fit together and make sense. It's a huge point. And we see that it all fits together. There's no accidents, and that the same infinite intelligence that put laws into science, like this kind of thing. What am I demonstrating? Which law is this I'm demonstrating? Oops, Sir Isaac Newton. By the way before you took physics, you learned about gravity. Where? Like when you tried to stand up when you were a toddler, when you dropped food off the high chair, when you rolled off your mother's bed. But even before you learned it formally, you knew these rules, cause, effect, and that's how you survive in this world. Imagine if every time you walked out your door, you randomly flew in a different direction. None of us would live very long. So when it comes to science, we know there's cause and effect. When it comes to history, I don't know what's going to happen. Guys, the same infinite intelligence that put laws into science put laws into history. It's a completely different way of looking at the world, both in terms of the plot and in terms of the ability to understand that our actions, especially collectively, can impact the outcome, just like in gravity. So humanity returns to God, Jewish people lead the way, becomes the plot of the entire story, not just Jewish history. Now, I asked this years ago in a classroom, and a guy said, wait, Rabbi, time out. He said, Rabbi, how many people are in the world? What's the world's population today? 7.4 billion. He said, Rabbi, how many Jews are in the world? Now, by the way, I fly a lot on airplanes, even not just including El Al, but a lot in America, and it really stinks nowadays with TSA and everything. But if I can get people to talk to me, I always ask them, it's not the first thing I ask them, like, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? Hi, my name's Ken Spiro. How many Jews do you think there are in the world? Like, get away from me, you weirdo. Now, it's amazing the numbers they give me. Usually 100 to 1,000 times higher than there really are. I have had at least 30 people tell me there's as many Jews in the world as Chinese, and half of them were Chinese. A guy once told me everyone in Hollywood is a Jew who has got his nose done and changed his name. I said, you're pretty anti-Semitic, but 50% correct. Although I say, since I found out that Scarlett Johansson is Jewish, I know anything is possible. Now, if we can get her to come to one of these conferences, you know how many people would show up? It'd be awesome. Yes, she is. She really is. Actually, we have two more. Now we have DC and Marvel Comics. We've got Gal Gadot and Scarlett Johansson. Come on, Jews do control the world. It's unbelievable. But seriously, why do people think there's so many more Jews in the world than there really are?
Because we're always in the news.
Yeah, we're scattered everywhere and crazy disproportionately impactful, and we tend to be kind of loud. But how many Jews are really in the world? The guy said, Rabbi, how many people in the world? 7.4 billion. He said, Rabbi, how many Jews are in the world? What's the world's real Jewish population? About 14 or so million. He said, Rabbi, what percentage of the world is Jewish? I said, 0.2% of the world is Jewish. He said, Rabbi, you're telling me Jews aren't even 1% of the human race, but the plot of human history is humanity returns to God, Jewish people lead the way? Aren't you being a little arrogant and egocentric here? I said, aren't you asking a really good question in a really obnoxious way? It's a great question. And I told him that one of my favorite quotes about history is a British lord. His name is Bolingbroke. It's a fantastic quote. He said, history is philosophy with examples. That's a great quote, by the way. So I said, based on that idea, I said, I'm going to give you a couple of examples from Jewish history that clearly illustrate that we play a unique role in the world. Each of these examples is really an entire class, but I'm going to do each of them literally in a minute or two. Example number one, I call the infantry example, as in military. So I have, by the way, I have five kids. 4 of the 5 did the Army. Actually, 3 did the Army, 1 did the Navy, and the 3 did the Army, including one of my daughters. They were all combat medics, which is pretty cool. I had one in Golani, one in Sanchanim, one in Karakal, one in Chelayam. I also did the Army, by the way, in Israel. I was in Givati, but it was like so long ago, Joshua, like from the book of Joshua, was my commanding officer. But when we would go out on patrol, by the way, when I did the Army, we used to do foot patrol in Gaza, because we were still in Gaza. This was long time, almost 30 years ago. We would go out 2 by 2 with one guy in the front. This is not an Israeli military thing. All armies in the world do this when they're on patrol. 2 by 2 with one guy in the front. The guy in the front is called, I once asked that, and the guy yells out from the back of the audience, dead! The guy in the front is called what? In military terminology. What do we call him? Point man. The point man. A position of unique responsibility, but a position of tremendous danger. Because he's the first guy there. If you're going to step into the minefield or walk into an ambush, who's going to get it first? Point man. When humanity fumbled the ball and Abraham picked it up, we became the point nation of history. And I hate to do it as a huge class in a minute, but this point is tremendous, because what I'm telling you now from the Jewish perspective is the one true cause of all anti-Semitism. I'm sure you've all studied the topic, why we're hated. Forget all those excuses. We hate the Jews because they kidnap Christian babies, use their blood to bake matzah. We poison wells. We're in league with the devil. We control the world's economy, seismic activity, solar flags. We trigger tsunamis in Southeast Asia to drown Indonesia with tidal waves. Release sharks into the Red Sea to destroy Egyptian tourism. Send vultures to spy on Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Release wild pigs into Palestinian territory to eat their crops and terrorize their population. We steal the cloud cover from Iran. Yes. By the way, some of these things were said a month ago, some of these things were said 1,000 years ago. None of them have anything to do with reality. The one true cause of anti-Semitism is we have a unique role to play in the world. We are out in front. And when evil comes into this world and you contest it like gravity, we will be the first target. You can literally tell how a country is doing in terms of human rights and democracy by how it treats its Jews. Because it starts with us and then it just spreads to everyone else. And George Gilder, in his book, The Israel Test, he says the same thing. And he's not even Jewish. He says, just as Jews within a country are the canary in the coal mine, the litmus test of morality, he said, Israel is the Jew amongst the nations as a state. Show me what a country thinks of Israel. I'll tell you all about their democracy and human rights. You think it's an accident the most dangerous rogue states in the world, like North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, hate Israel? When evil comes into the world, it targets us first because we have even subconscious, by the way, even though most of the people do believe these stupid things about us, but the ultimate, even subconscious reason is that we have this different level of responsibility. The other example that I gave this guy to show we play a unique role in the world, let's go back to the Hollywood movie analogy. In a Hollywood movie, we talked about that before a little bit, the actors in a movie are stacked like in a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid are the smallest number of actors, but they're at the top. Which actors are those? Those are the A-list actors, like the ultimate A-list couple, who's still not divorced yet, by the way. They're still doing this. Is whom? Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. That's like real A-list. But who comes below the lead actors? Sorry? The supporting actors. Then you have what? Then you have the bit parts, and then you have the walk-ons or the extras, as they're called. Like the guys walking in the street seat or sitting in the restaurant that don't have any lines. There's no one on the set of a movie that's not there for a reason, even if it's a bit part. There's no one on the planet Earth who's not here for a reason. Every human being serves a purpose. My aunt has that in her refrigerator. You ever notice the refrigerator is the smartest appliance in your house? Like all the important things are on there? She has a great sign. It says, every human being serves a purpose. And little letters underneath it says, even if it's just as a really bad example. But to be the A-list in Hollywood is pretty cool. To be like, any of these people, like, Mark Wahlberg or Dwayne The Rock or whoever. It's great. You get a lot of money. People love you. What's the one downside of being that famous? No privacy. Paparazzi everywhere. That's in Hollywood. But in the real story, the ultimate story, when we chose for ourselves a unique responsibility, we became the lead actors in the ultimate story. But unlike in Hollywood, we don't get the fame and the fortune. We just get all the paparazzi. And this points to a point that is actually, you're all familiar with it. It's actually quite supernatural, but it happens all the time. What happens when supernatural or weird happens to you daily? It becomes totally normal. What's the point I'm talking about? It was best stated by a great journalist who just recently passed away, Charles Krauthammer. He had a great quote. Jews is news. And since good news is no news and only bad news makes news, when a Jew is perceived to do something wrong, even when he hasn't, or the Jewish state, come on, the Jewish Israel, like little teeny island of democracy, free market, open, capitalist, developed, tolerant, multicultural state, surrounded by 22 states of the Arab League with no human rights, no democracy, no industrialization, yet no one seems to care what they do and the world goes nuts on Israel. When I made fun of the UN before, it wasn't without justification. The useless nations, by the way, last year had 27 condemnations they passed between the General Assembly and Security Council and Human Rights Commission. 27 condemnations, 6 for the whole world and 21 against Israel. And the year before it was 26, and it was 5 for the whole world and 21 against Israel. The double standard is crazy. The French are telling us how to behave.
Yeah.
You know, we used to say in New York, Statue of Liberty had both hands up when it left Paris. Give me a break. How many French does it take to defend Paris? Actually, we don't know. It's never been tried. Anyway, boo. Okay. But seriously, guys, it drives us nuts. But if what I'm saying is true, this is the way it has to be. We will never be treated like anyone else because on a deep subconscious level, the world is aware. You Jews, you Jewish state, like it says in Hebrew National, the not quite kosher meat, we have to answer to a higher authority. Being Jewish might not be comfortable, but it's always meaningful, and the world is always going to remind us that we have to answer to a higher authority. So these two examples illustrate clearly we have a unique role to play in the story. So we've answered the first big question. Purpose of creation is relationship with God. Humanity blows it. Along comes Abraham and chooses for himself and for us this unique responsibility. The new plot of not just Jewish history, but all of human history is humanity returns to God. Jewish people lead the way. And in the few minutes we have left, though, we have to deal with the other huge question. How long does that story take? So several places in the Talmud it says, for 6,000 years the world was created. Which doesn't mean from the Big Bang to the end of time is 6,000 years. It means from the end of day 6, and that day 6 could be one very long day if you ask Dr. Schroeder. From the end of day 6 to the end of normative history is a maximum of 6,000 years. Where does the 6 come from in 6,000 besides the number of times at a wedding, bar mitzvah, or Project Inspire conference you go up to the buffet table before going for dessert? What is it? Where's the 6 come from in the 6,000? Yeah, 6 days of creation, exactly. 6 days of creation. And we know that Jewish weeks begin on what day of the week? Sunday, which in Israel we don't use the pagan god names like Sunday and Thursday. By the way, who's 2 and Tuesday? One day you're going to be in a game show, like $10 million grand prize. Who is 2 named after? Now, if you get this right because of me, I want like 20%. How do I know this? Besides, I love trivia. I had a guy in my class in Israel like 4 years ago. Big, huge Danish guy. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, claimed he was Jewish. Named 2. I said, 2, like the day of the week? Who are you named after? He said, 2 is the Norse god of war. He's like Mars for the Vikings. I said, that's pretty cool, but couldn't your parents give you a nice Jewish name like David? You have a brother named Wed? Anyway. But we don't use the pagan god names. We say Yom Rishon, first day. Sheni, Shlishi, Chamishi, Shishi. We're counting first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, right? And we get to Friday night at sunset, a few hours from now. What do we get to? We don't call it Yom Shvi'i. The 7th day we call it Shabbat. Why do we call it Shabbat and not Yom Shvi'i? Because Shabbat has a different energy. And Shabbat, by the way, is an acquired taste. I was raised totally secular, thinking people who kept Shabbat were crazy. Now I would say, keeping Shabbat for a very long time, even if I, God forbid, didn't believe in God, I'd still keep Shabbat. Just have a day without my smartphone. It's the best day, no technology. I get phantom vibrations on my hip on Shabbat morning. It's really embarrassing. But like the one day everyone reads and talks and rejuvenates, all puns intended. It's an acquired taste. So we have the 7th day of the week. So too we're being told, and this is mentioned in several places. It's mentioned in Tractate Rosh Hashanah. It's mentioned in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 97a, that every day of creation is also equivalent to not just a day of the week, but 1,000 years of human history, which means from 1 to 999 is the equivalent of Sunday or Yom Rishon. Then you have from 1,000 to 1,999 is Yom Sheni, which is Monday. The difference being, when you get to the year 6,000, you don't enter what's called Shabbat. You enter what's called, in Jewish history or in Jewish time, you enter what's called Olam Haba. How do we translate Olam Haba? The world to come, which is not where you go when you're dead. What's death, by the way? Death is the separation of the soul from the body. Like you get your new phone, like your iPhone 10, whatever. What do? You don't, well, if you're smart, you take your old phone to Israel and sell it for as much as the new phone costs in America. But no, what do you want to save from your phone? You want to save the contacts, the photos, the music. That goes to the cloud. That's the soul, okay? The phone, you recycle. That's what happens. The soul separates from the body. The soul goes up to Olam HaNishamot. Okay, and then if you did it right, you get to hang out there and have that first-class pleasure, hanging out with God, having that relationship. But if not, since we're judged on the decisions we make, and the only time we can make decisions is when we're a soul and a body together, we're being pulled in different directions, and we get judged by, how we choose to go, we get recycled back into another body so we could earn more points in this world to get more up there. Okay, what's that called? Recycled back into a body? What am I talking about? Transmigration of souls, reincarnation, Gilgul Nishamot, okay? Which means, by the way, Judaism saying if you are here now, if we're here now, we have all been here before. That's even one of the lines from Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's song, Deja Vu. We have all been here before. If you want to know who you were here before, either get them to fly in or come to Israel, back in the old city, and I'll introduce you to my Russian-Canadian psychotherapist friend, Rabbi Dr. Efim Svirsky, who for a very reasonable price will regress you through hypnosis into who you were the last time you were here. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's really cool. I've done it. It's called past life regression. It is super cool stuff. Anyway, who was I? I'm not going to tell you. I will only say, not the topic of the class, but I will say one thing. It's a little bit like intense. Many people I know who've done it, who are born post-Holocaust, are a gilgul of someone who died in the Holocaust. So it can be an interesting, a very intense experience to go do that. Anyway, so when you die, you go to Olam HaNeshamot. Olam Haba is when the world goes back to the way it was before we messed it up. If you've heard of concepts in Judaism like resurrection of the dead and final judgment, which Christianity also has, but they took from us, that takes place in Olam Haba. Before we get to Olam Haba, we have a transitional period, Judaism says. Like just before you get into Shabbat, like we're going to have in a few hours. From the time the sun goes down to the stars come out is twilight. What's the ceremony we do then? Kabbalat Shabbat. You got to ease your way into it. What's the Kabbalat Shabbat of human history then, in terms of the historical cycle? It's called the Messianic era, the M.E., the era of the Messiah. It's amazing, by the way, how many Jews think Messiah is not even a Jewish concept. One thing I've learned teaching for many, many years is lack of knowledge never stops a lot of people I know from voicing their opinions on things they know nothing about. Like in physics, you know the famous law of physics that light travels faster than sound? Which is why first you see lightning and then you hear thunder. It's also why some people appear to be intelligent until you hear them speak, especially some politicians. If I had $1 for every time one of my students said, we don't believe in Messiah, it's a Christian concept, Judaism's a here and now religion. When it comes to eating at the buffet, we're definitely here and now. But Messiah is our idea. I have a whole class on this alone. The Christians stole it from us, changed the definition, used it against us, and don't pay us any royalties for it. But without doing the whole class, Messiah, simply put, is a person with a certain lineage and Torah knowledge and spiritual connection and leadership skills, but he acts like we say, we already did physics, so now we'll do chemistry. He's a catalyst. What does a catalyst do? Remember in chemistry? What's a catalyst job? Has to speed up a process. His job is to prepare not just the Jewish people, but the whole world to enter that final phase. And Jewish tradition says he has to come and complete the job by the year 6000. Not show up at the year 6000, complete the job. And someone always wants to ask me, what if the Messiah doesn't come by the year 6000? I always give the same answer. Ask for your money back. It hasn't happened yet. But let's do the time now. We just came into a new year not so long ago. What year are we in now? 5779. If every day of the week is 1,000 years and you get to 5,000, what day of the week are we in? Friday. 5,500 is halfway through Friday. 5,750 is 3/4 of the way through the day. 5779, where are we? Late Friday afternoon. This is the time in a religious home when the wife is usually yelling at the husband, get in the shower, it's going to be Shabbos, 20 minutes. And you guys know Murphy's Law? Like the chance of the bread falling butter side down is directly proportional to the price of the carpet, and those important laws of reality. What's Murphy's Law of Shabbat? Anyone who keeps Shabbat knows this. No matter when you start preparing for Shabbat, even if it's in New York on June 21st, Sunday morning, the longest Shabbat of the year, when Shabbat comes in like 9:30 at night, you start making your cholent at 7 a.m. Sunday morning. What are you still doing half hour before sunset? Running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Everything speeds up and gets intense as you approach the deadline of Shabbat. Everything speeds up and gets intense as we approach the deadline of the Shabbat of human history. But do the math, guys. 6,000 minus 5779. What do we got left here? 221, and that's a maximum. Just you bring in Shabbat at sunset? No. You bring it in Jerusalem 40 minutes early, 18 minutes early. I can't go into this now, but there are Jewish sources that say you can literally lop 200 off the 221. Which doesn't mean the Messiah is coming in 20. I don't know when he's coming. If I did, I'd be a prophet. If I was a prophet, I'd be working in the stock exchange and not teaching here. But you can, within a couple of decades, the whole thing is over. Lambs are lying down with lions, having soya barbecues. The UN is getting together like 55 times every day to pass pro-Israel resolutions. What do you learn from that, by the way? For you guys, Get real estate in Israel now, anywhere. The French Jews are getting all the good apartments. Mashiach's going to come. You're going to call El Al. Like, I'm sorry, it's a 7-month wait for a flight. Then you get up in a tent with the Goldbergs from Lawrence and the Schwartzes from Bathurst and Eglinton, like stuck in some like corner on the Egyptian border with like 4 tents and a spigot of water. And the French will all be sitting like in, in Netanya and Savignon and, Jerusalem. Seriously. Hopefully, by the time the conference is over, there'll be an announcement, Motzi Shabbos. I got a return ticket already, so I'm safe. Anyway, guys, we're basically done. So one more little point, and then we're finished. So, purpose of creation, relationship with God, humanity blows it. Along comes Abraham and chooses for himself and for us this unique responsibility. The new plot of human history is humanity returns to God. Jewish people lead the way. We have a maximum of 6,000 years to do that in, according to most Jewish opinions. And we're very close to the end of that time with 221 and very likely a lot less time left. But there's one more point we have to do before we finish. Just a very brief little history of time. Before a nice young Jewish man, a little over 100 years ago, in his spare time working in a Swiss patent office, came up with the theory that changed our whole understanding of reality. Who am I talking about? Albert Einstein, which is the worst Jewish name to have, by the way. Einstein and Rothschild. I've had both of them in my class. Like, what if Einstein is stupid and Rothschild is poor? But seriously, they have... So before Einstein came along, the whole world believed in the Greek Aristotelian view of time, including people like Sir Isaac Newton, that time, like a treadmill, goes around and around and around and has no beginning and no end. But not only that, in the ancient world, and I'm going to do a class on this tomorrow, on Judaism, paganism, multiculturalism, you believed the world was full of a bunch of gods who were just like you and I, except for 2 things. What did the gods have that we didn't have? Superhuman and immortal. If you forgot your mythology, just think of the X-Men. Same thing. Okay? Superhuman, immortal. But they cynically used and abused you. Your decisions didn't matter. The whole subplot of all Greek tragedy, like Euripides, is the futility of fighting against your fate. It's like swimming upstream. What happens? You eventually just get exhausted and you drown. So the basic worldview, literally for thousands of years, was the story doesn't end, your decisions don't matter. Is that a positive or negative way of looking at the world? Negative. Is it empowering or unempowering? Totally unempowering. Let's give the guy a sad face. Okay, into this world appears us, the Jewish people, and we have been for thousands of years telling the whole human race that they are wrong, which is why we have been so beloved throughout human history. That was sarcasm. Our view of time looks like Slinky. Remember Slinky? Okay, they have a Slinky out for iPhones yet? We believe that time is cyclic, but it's not static. And by the way, and this works for all levels of history, and there's multiple levels of history. There's our personal history, the history of the Jewish people, the history of the human race. On a personal level, we get the point that we're all different like snowflakes. That God recycles us through challenges. No one has the same challenge as anyone else here. And if you don't get it right, you get stuck dealing with the same issues throughout your life. Like you have really bad temper and anger issues as a toddler. Toddlers are not known for their patience, but you're really bad. You're going to have the same issues as a young adult and as a teenager and as a young, and as middle age. You're going to die with the same juvenile attitude towards anger and impatience. God, by the way, is an amazing coach. If you can high jump 5 feet, what's your coach going to do? It's going to raise the bar. It's the essential nature of being human to deal with progressively greater challenges. Our whole life is like a to-do list. I have one of these programs on my phone where you add things on the bottom, you check them off the top. But hopefully the last thing we check off on the list before we check out of this world is at a little bit higher level than we started out with. Like we started out with big accomplishments like drooled-filled diaper. Then we got to like dry at night, learn to walk. But hopefully we ended with married, had meaningful relationships, brought beautiful children into the world, ran a successful business, started a really great charity, won a Nobel Prize, won gold in the Olympics. Not too likely if you're Jewish. Remember that joke, what's the sign of maturity in a Jewish boy when he recognizes statistically he's got a far greater chance of owning a professional sports team than ever actually playing on one? But on a personal level, we get this, but this is how it works for the Jewish people and the human race. That we will collectively get recycled through challenges, and we're not going to get to move forward. We're going to get stuck unless we get it right. Just like that great 1990s movie, Groundhog's Day. Who's seen the movie Groundhog's Day? It's a great movie where this guy just gets stuck in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania on February 2nd, this obnoxious weatherman. And every morning he wakes up, it's the same day over and over again, and only he's aware of it. When does he finally get to February 3rd in the movie? When he gets it right. But that's what's going to happen to us also. We're going to get stuck for 6 years, 600 years, 6,000 years, making the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again. But guys, is the only way to get to the end of the story, like in the movie, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, trial and error, hit, miss, or is there a way of short-circuiting this whole process and getting the entire, not just the Jewish people, but the whole human race to the end of that story quickly and painlessly? And the answer is yes. There is. In this game, we're allowed to cheat. Nachmanides, the great medieval Jewish scholar, in his commentary in the book of Genesis, he has a great line. He says, Maseh avot siman labanim. Who can translate that? Maseh avot siman labanim. The actions of the fathers are assigned to the children. That which happens in the beginning of the story is the revealed pattern for everything that comes later. If you want to understand who we are, guys, just look at our ancestors. That's what the book of Genesis is all about. You want to know who we are? Look at Abraham. He's us. His drive is our drive. Look at Joseph and his brothers and the rivalry and the jealousy. That's the Jewish people until today. Look at Isaac and the Philistines or the Jews in Egypt. That's the whole paradigm for the crazy roller coaster relationship we have with the non-Jewish world. They can't live with us. They can't live without us. They pull us towards, they push us away. Guys, our past is our future. Jewish history is Jewish destiny. You can't know where you're going to as a Jew until you understand where you're coming from. And when I'm teaching my students in Jerusalem, I always tell them, I say, guys, first of all, don't try and take notes on me. No one can write as fast as I speak or type as fast as I speak. First of all, I forgot to bring a copy, but I have a great book. Ask my mother. She will agree 100%. Crash Course in Jewish History. I have copies here, by the way, also. Motzi Shabbat, please God. For you, special price, as we say in the Middle East. But I say, in that book, we got all the names, the dates, the timelines, the maps, the charts. That's the plumbing of history. I tell my students, the only thing I want you to know are the lessons from the past. Not because it's going to be in an exam, but rather because these are the rules of the game that we need to know. It's the playbook. You know, Israel Meir Lau, I flew on the plane with him. A bunch of us were flying in from Israel. I saw him on the flight last night. He's one of the youngest survivors of Buchenwald, former chief rabbi of Israel, now chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. He has a great quote. He said that a nation that doesn't value its past has no right to dream about its future. And I would tweak that quote and say, and a nation that doesn't learn from its past is going to have a very tough time getting there. So guys, forget the names, the dates, the places. The lessons we learn from our past are absolutely critical so that each and every one of us in our own unique way, and hopefully all of us together, can learn those lessons, come together, focus on what unites us and stop focusing on what divides us, and put the incredible energy and drive and creativity, idealism we have as a people together. And then we get to the end of this story, which is the ultimate story, as quickly and as painlessly as possible. And thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.